and welcome to the Point. It is Monday, September 23rd, 2020. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Television Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, GBN TV channel 7, 11 and 20, and good morning to the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9. Thank you so much for joining us on this morning's program. Our guests this morning are representing the civil society organization. I have three members of the grouping, Sandra Ferguson, Mr. Joseph Roberts, and Davidson Nedd. And this morning we're talking the issuance and reissuance of the election voter or the voters registration cards. Good morning, lady and gentlemen.
Good morning, Blossom, and thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. So let's get right. Good morning, Mr. Roberts.
Locally, outside, and since last week, well, not only last week, but quite some time, I want to challenge Sister Blossom.
Me?
She had a big celebration on 25th, but I think she's still jealous. She wished this 25th was in December. All the bullshit posting about September being the best month. No, she's grieving that it should be in December. This is my month.
Joke.
Happy birthday and continue enjoying.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So let's get into it. We're talking the voters registration card. Let's start first of all with since earlier this year, since 2020 started, the Parliamentary Elections Office has advised that the voters registration cards need to be reissued and there needs to be re-registration to a certain extent to get those voter ID cards. Civil society has had meetings or a meeting with the elections office since then. So let's start there.
Mr. Nedd, go ahead.
Mr. Nedd? Mr. Nedd? Okay, I can't.
I am here, Mr. Nedd.
Okay, right. Sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Nedd.
Hello?
Yes, start over. Yes, I'm hearing you now. So go ahead. Start over.
Okay, yes. Just around January 9th, civil society responded to an invitation from the supervisor of elections to discuss matters pertaining to the electoral process. We were the three of us here today represented civil society at that meeting, together with other stakeholders. And the gist of the meeting was that our registration cards were to expire at the ending of January. And that the supervisor thought that this was an urgent matter that should be addressed, and that amendments to the Representation of the People's Act were necessary to facilitate the process of re-registration. At that meeting, we asked for a number of clarifications, and we also asked that we should, as a stakeholder, that we should see the draft legislation that was being proposed. Subsequent to that meeting, the supervisor responded saying that the amendments were no longer necessary and that the matter of the reissuance of the cards was an administrative matter. We are confused by these series of developments, and we ask again for clarity. And that brought us to our last meeting of August 18th. And we met again with the supervisor of the election, Mr. Elvis Morin, and Mr. Fernando Philip, who was the public education and public relations officer. And I don't know, Sandra, if you want to go ahead from here.
But before Sister Sandra goes, I just want to make a point here that Sister Blossom used the word re-registration, and Brother Nedd talks about re-registration. He also used the term reissuance, and he talked about the need for clarification. And this is a technical issue. It's not clear up to this point in time whether or not, and I'm using the word here, replacement, whether this is replacement is in fact a re-registration or a reissuance. And I think Sister Sandra will take from there to give a difference in these two terms, re-registration, reissuance. And the Parliamentary Election Office, via the Supervisor of Election, need to come forward not only to civil society, but the wider community. And I think for your information also, as the media, GBN, Sisters Blossom, for you to understand and to know and to let the public understand what is the procedure that is taking place now. And exactly clarification and reissuance or re-registration.
Okay, thank you, JK. And good morning to all the listeners and followers of the program. So to take it from there, when we responded to the invitation for the meeting of January 9th, and we subsequently expressed concern, but of course then we went into a COVID mode. That is why there was such a long delay. And we have noted that Form 34 of the Representation of the People's Act speaks to reissuance of voters' ID. But the reissuance of the Form 34 in the Representation of the People's Act does not make provisions for the expiration of the card. It provides for other things, like your card is damaged, it has been stolen, etc.
It's defaced, lost.
It's defaced, right. It does not make provisions for the expiry date. And therefore, when we went to the meeting of January 9th, we were told, yes, that the Representation of the People's Act does not make provisions for that. And therefore, these amendments were necessary. Indeed, 2 days after that meeting, there was a press conference in which the supervisor of elections and his team indicated as well that these amendments were going to be tabled in Parliament. And then we were most confused when at the end of the month, we received this information indicating that there was going to be no amendments. So we are not clear. I myself, I have gone to like everybody else, my voter's ID has expired, so I have gone to get a new voter's ID. And it seems to me, therefore, it is a registration process going on, all over again, where you bring your documents, your fingerprints are taken, etc. And there is a concern because, indeed, those who started, in fact, before the COVID lockdown, a number of persons have not yet received their voter's ID. And indeed, when I asked the individual who was in charge, she told me about 2 months, which would take me down to November. And she was not, but she indicated to me she could not give a commitment because there was a bottleneck in the system. And if this is happening as well, then we are concerned that there is no publicity, there is no promotion from the Electoral Office, the Parliamentary Elections Office, about this process that people should be engaging in. Now, we noted that a list was issued at the end of June. I don't know how many people saw it. What I do know is that I tried via electronic
to
access to see whether or not to check for my name. I could not access the list. This was raised when we went to have the meeting with the team in August, and they indicated that they had looked at that and all was okay. But I have since tried again and could not access the list. So this is a matter we want to bring to public concern, because this is not something that we pay attention to. We leave it up to those who are offering themselves for. So I leave my two colleagues to deal with that.
I want to come in here before Mr. Nedd continues on the point that Sister Sandra said he will do. Sister Sandra said a lot, and she has a lot more to say. But I want us to retract a little bit to get certain things clear and to make some points. In terms, she said that she went and she recognized that it's a registration. I want to make it clear that from the Representation of the People's Act, the only form of registration that should be taking place at this time is new voter registration. In fact, the Act provides that once you are being registered, you remain registered until some conditions are met, which include death and other illegal action. So this registration process, if it is a re-registration process, here again, the supervisor of election need to clarify. Secondly, Sister Sandra raised the issue that apparently a form which is used for the re-registration or reissuance is Form 34. So I am asking, and I think any conscious person would ask, that if you are asking me to reissue, to be reissued a form, a voter card, and I am to apply for it in terms of putting up this Form 34. There is no provision on that Form 34 for an expired card. Are you now encouraging me or inciting me to commit a criminal act by putting in expired card or signing to something which is not catered for legally?
No, let me stop you right there, JK. The issue of form come up in that case, right? So that is why I indicated that this seemed to be a re-registration. I don't know if there are individuals who have spoken to that, but in my case, there was no issue of Form 34. I went along with my identification documents, and that is why we indicate that we are confused about the terms. What is happening? It is clearly not reissuance as provided for under Form 34. So it's what I was engaged in was clearly a re-registration process.
Correct. And
just want to know that. Because I was not asked, and in my case, the question of Form 34 did not come up at all.
Correct. But there are certain people who have this concern. If it is a re-issuance, then Form 34 applies. And if we have to use Form 34, one of the questions or need for clarification is, will this be illegal? And then we continue where Brother Dave has started in terms of, there were many other points or suggestions given to the supervisor of election to include, if we are going to have an amendment, because this piecemeal doing things can work. We have many outstanding issues. And then it was rejected and said, no, it was a matter of urgency. And one of the main points put forward, that it will be limited to the expiry card, is that this card is used for financial transaction. And here again is our concern. What is the primary role for the voter identification card? Is it for submitting when you vote at elections, or is it more to do with transaction? Whatever is the situation, as it stands right now, after 9 months, 8 months counting, there are many persons who have not received a replaced voter identification card, and this is a grave concern. So there's more to say, but let me pass over as Mr. Nedd continues.
Okay. The issue of voter padding is one that has been addressed on a number of occasions with meetings of civil society and the electoral office. On January 29th, 2018, a delegation met with the supervisor of elections, then Alex Phillip, and this issue was brought up. And if I may read from the minutes of that meeting, concerns were raised about voter padding, i.e. people registering in other constituencies than the one in which they reside. Clarification was sought as to whether information provided by persons were being verified and whether persons were who presented themselves at the office to complete the process of registration, that information was verified. What was the level of non-approvals, or how many investigations did the electoral office carry out? So as a voter, you have the responsibility to bring your information to the registration officer. It is the duty of the registration officer, and by extension, the electoral office, to verify that information, including going to your place of abode to ensure that the information that you're given is truthful, right? The supervisor noted then that if mistakes were made by registration officers, the error had to be corrected at the level of the registration officer. So if the registration officer was the one collecting the information and he made any mistakes, you'd have to go back to the registration officer so that he can go through the process again to correct that process. This has, since 2018, again, this issue has come up, and it speaks to some very basic instructions that come from the Constitution, that as a voter, you should vote in the constituency in which you reside. And the verification of which constituency you reside in now becomes a very important factor. There have been a number of amendments to the Representation of the People's Act. Some were done in 2018, and those amendments refer to you being able to verify your place of residence by virtue of a utility bill. So your utility bill, your Grand Leg bill, your Nawasa bill, your telephone bill, your Flow or Digicel bill, by those amendments are now legal instruments that you can use to say where you live. The question that we have been asking is that, especially among the boundaries of some of the constituencies. For instance, I live in the South. Springs Main Road, there would be voters who, for instance, live on Springs, whose address would be Springs Main Road or Springs. But depending on which side of the road that you live in Springs, you can either vote in the South or you can vote in the Northeast. So by virtue of you producing a document that says that you live in Springs, does not verify which constituency you vote in. And that is the requirement. You have to verify the constituency. So those amendments that were made, we struggle to understand again how that in fact qualifies the instructions that were given by the Constitution. And in this regard, we are asking for some explanation. And it's interesting to note that there are other requirements for the voter. For instance, the voter has to be 18 years of age. The Constitution requires that you be 18 years of age. In order for you to verify that you're 18 years of age, you have to bring a government-issued document that's signed, it's sealed and it's signed by a person who has taken an oath of office. That is to verify your age. The other requirement is that you have to verify your citizenship. And the Constitution says that you have to be a Commonwealth citizen. Again, a Commonwealth citizen, you can verify your citizenship by a passport, which is a government-issued document. It's sealed, it's signed by someone who's taken an oath of office. And all of those requirements, the signing, the seal, the person has taken an oath of office, are part of the construct of our Constitution, which is supposed to defend the democratic process. So all of those are very important. So we are concerned that with respect to verifying the constituency, which is another requirement of the Constitution, that our policymakers thought that by virtue of just presenting a utility bill, that would suffice. That is of concern to us. So it was against this backdrop that, again, we tried engaging with the supervisor, and he has graciously allowed us to do so. And we hope that, this discussion would continue. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
Yes, I want to come in here.
Before you go ahead, Mr. Roberts, just give me a moment. Let me just take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and continue the discussion. We are speaking with members of civil society organization, their concerns as it relates to the reissuance of voters' registration cards. We're going to take a quick break and come back. This is To The Point, GBN Classic. We'll be right back.
Reading is too hard. Reading school books is lame. I'd rather read about children like me and cool things. I can read, but sometimes I don't even know why I have to. It makes no sense.
Why can't we read about things we like?
Reading is the key to unlocking all learning and ensuring that children reach their potential. Here's what the children have to say.
Make reading fun.
Teach me how to read, but let me practice reading with things I like to read. Talk with me and read with me, at least for a short time every day.
Let me tell you my own stories.
Read, learn, grow. The children are the future. Help them read, learn, grow. So parents, you play a part.
This message is brought to you by the OECS USAID Early Learners Program, funded by United States Agency for International Development.
Get away from your daily stress with a Grenada vacation at the Koyaba Beach Resort. Koyaba is located on the world-famous Grand Anse Beach and boasts 5.5 acres of beautiful garden. We offer offer excellent service, good food and drink, well-appointed rooms and friendly staff in a safe environment. Facilities include 2 restaurants, 2 bars, swimming pool, water sports, tennis, gym and body treatment rooms. Call 473-444-4129.
The marijuana issue continues to burn hot in all corners of the country and across the region. Some islands like Barbados plan to decriminalize small amounts of marijuana for personal use. The Grenadian government says it will decide, but only after consultation with the people on the issue. What's your take? On the next Beyond the Headlines, host Odette Campbell will take a comprehensive look at the decriminalization or legalization of marijuana and the possible impact on the country's development. Panelists include Peter Wickham, research analyst on marijuana, Dr. Andre Gordon of Jamaica, and Dr. Gerald Thompson, CEO of the Medical Cannabis Authority of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Beyond the Headlines, Monday at 8:35 p.m. on GBN.
Welcome back to The Point. We're speaking with representatives of civil society organization Joseph Roberts, Davidson, Nedd, and Miss Sandra Ferguson. Before we took the break, Mr. Roberts, you wanted to weigh in on what Mr. Nedd said. Go ahead. Unmute your mic. All right.
Thank you once again. Yeah, just a number of points, just to back up. First of all, what we are doing here, coming from the concerns raised by Brother Dave, it's not only a matter of dialogue between civil society, ourselves, and the Parliamentary Election Office. What we are doing here is very critical so that the general population can be aware and try to seek answers, just as we ourselves are trying to do that. That's point one. So I would like everyone to take a keen interest in what is being said here and other matters that relate to democracy, and more specifically, to the way what's happening with the Parliamentary Elections Office. Secondly, Brother Dave raised the issue of what might be happening, especially in terms of the registration of voters, might be unconstitutional. So I like persons to, again, seek information, again, make reference to your constitution, and try to understand all the amendments that is taking place with the Representation of the People Act, make sure that it is consistent with the requirements of the Constitution. Thirdly, based on what Mr. Nedd presents, it means that this amendment was done without any form of transparency. How many persons, institutions as well as the ordinary people, knew about this type of amendment in which you can use your utility bill to go as a form of proof that you qualify? How many of us had known that before? This is very, very important. The transparency, who were the persons consulted and who took part with the administration, I would say, to do this thing. And fifthly, I want to reiterate that at the beginning of this year, when the issue of the expiry voter registration identification card came up, we said, well, if you're going to have any amendment, let us do it in a holistic way, in which most of all of the outstanding amendments, recommendations, put forward for general approach. The response was no. And so issues as this would have gone into it. And I will end by making a 6th point with the voter pardon. One of the observations and recommendations coming from previous past elections, but more importantly, the last election in March of 2018, one of the observer mission teams, we had those coming from CARICOM, and we had the OAS, Organization of American States. The Organization of American States in particular made mention about the need to readdress our registration process and the registry. And the whole idea of this using our utility bill came into question. So So there are many outstanding issues which need clarification, which need addressing, and which need to be put in proper perspective for genuine constitutional reform in a very transparent, honest manner. And this is what is outstanding. And the people need to be aware of these matters in going forward, or else we'll continuously having this type of discussion with no end in sight. I just want us to note this very importantly.
But you also noted something that has been in the public domain and public discussion since the notice went out that we need to re-register, basically, of the same legality of having to go through the entire registration process to get the new voters registration card. The question is, what are the implications if I do not go through the process before next elections? Let's say I do not want to go through the whole re-registration and have to bring in all my documents, and the next elections are called. What are the implications of that for me as a person who did not go through the process?
Again, I'll be giving my personal view. We need technical persons, especially in the legal fraternity, to come. But more than that, the parliamentary elections office itself need to come and clarify that. In fact, the supervisor of election, in his press conference in January on this matter, said that the reason why they have abandoned and they are not going through the amendment anymore, because they got advice from the legal affairs department or the attorney general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they are being guided by the chief legal advisor in the country. So they have to come forward to speak on this issue. My own personal point, though, from my legal understanding of the law, in particular election law, is that there can be a technicality there for election purposes. First of all, let me tell you that, and I said it before, once you are being registered, your name cannot be deleted. So it's a kind of, sorry to say this word, fake scenario. You are there, and they can't disallow you from voting. The whole idea of the expired voter identification card, to me, it's way in the balance whether it is legal or illegal. The approach, whether it is legal or illegal. I want to draw your attention also, recently in my little searching, there was a case some years ago in which a particular individual was prevented from casting his vote. We may have to go to the registry to get the exact case, but it was in the press. And he took the parliamentary election office to court. And they was arguing the point that he was not re-registered. In other words, his name was not on the current voter list. But at the first stage in the court case, he lost. But when he went to the Court of Appeal, they reversed the situation. Because the condition for reissuing, replacing, or re-registration, or take out your name from the list was not met. So getting back to your question, I can only give my personal opinion, which I'm somewhat confident. But then to be on the safe side, I am saying that the government, the legal person, must come forward with transparency, but not only transparency. It was only last week when I was pondering on certain things. Transparency is one. We need to get sincerity and accuracy, thoroughness on issue. You can come and tell me something, but what you tell me doesn't have to be factual. It can be half-truth. So I'm saying let us come straight to the matter. And I will go back to where I started to say it can be a little technicality there, playing for the next election. Sorry to be so personal and passionate. It can be a technicality there because in 2018, it was start to realize that the parliamentary election office informed the general public absolutely that you can vote without a voter identification card. I rest my case here.
Mr. Nedd, Ms. Ferguson?
Blossom, the implications for the voters can be very serious. In our deliberations with the previous supervisor of elections, going back to 2018, I don't know if you remember, when the supervisor of elections came publicly and said that you did not need your voter's ID to vote. We are now hearing a 180-degree turn around from this present supervisor, and this present supervisor is saying that we need our voter's ID to vote. So if you are not a part of the process, if you have not gone back to register or to get your card reissued, whatever the term is, and you don't have that card, as per the meeting of January 9th with the supervisor of elections, he says that you absolutely need your card to vote. So you would understand the implications. So it is absolutely necessary for us to clarify what
unmute your mic, Mr. Nedd. Sorry, it muted itself. Mr. Nedd?
Mr. Nedd drop off or somewhat? Mr. Sandra, you can say something until he comes back.
Ms. Ferguson?
Sometimes a problem.
Oh, Mr. Nedd is back.
So they're very serious issues. And it is something we would want some sort of a discussion to take place in the public domain. First and foremost, is the card a requirement according to law? Or is it not a requirement for voting? We've had two different opinions within the last 2 years with two different supervisors of elections. So for those of us who've been paying attention, that it's a red flag. What is the way forward?
On that note, let us open the phone lines and the platforms for viewers and listeners who may have questions as it relates to the reissuance of voters' registration cards for a civil society organization. You can call us on the landline 435-2041 or write out your messages on WhatsApp. It's also 435-2041. You can also pose your comments, questions, queries, concerns on the GBN Television Facebook page and the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel. Let's go to our first caller. Good morning, caller.
Yes, good morning, Citizen Welsh. Greetings and greetings to your guests, the panelists there, Brother Robbie, etc. Henry V, 531, I have it this way. Henry V, Act 3, Scene 1. Once more to the breach, dear friends, once more close the wall up with your English dead, in this case with your Grenadian. If we do not correct the anomalies of this imperial order in conch of the Queen's most excellent majesty that rules us and gives the state the privilege and the monopoly to do what they want without consultation with the people of this here country, this irregularity or these irregularities, anomalies, etc. shall continue. I remember in 1985, I was issued, 1945, yes, I was issued with a national identification card. Hear it, a national identification card. It may have been issued by the parliamentary office, but hear this. It was a national identification card which was based on the civil registry. Now I understand that the civil registry has been moved totally, not from the deeds and births of deeds of births and deaths, but moved totally to the parliamentary office. This is a problem that has to be corrected. I've lived in other places to round up. And at 9 years, the young people received a national 9 years old of age, received a national identification card. Until we correct this, and the civil or citizens registry is separated from the political component of it, called the electoral office, we will always have this problem. And there are many, many more things within this contraption they have devised for us so that one party can win the election all the time. I'm happy that this debate is being placed on the front burner in this here country, and I hope to be able to contribute more to it. We have to demand that the National Civil Registry return to the Registry of Deeds, not of deeds, but of births and deaths, and be separated. And so that department will transmit the information, because that will be dealing with, I repeat, births and deaths and settlement. In other words, immigration and settlement and however people receive their citizenship in the country, and that information should be then transferred to the electoral office. That has to change. There are many more things too. There is a question of financing and all them sort of things for election. So I'm happy that we're talking about that today, but we must understand that the basis of all this is that imperial order in council of the Queen's most excellent majesty, that illegitimate document never been made into law that rules us up to the 47 going on to 48 years in this here country. That has to change. Thank you and have a nice day. Will you, Citizen Welch?
Thank you very much, Citizen Rollo. Any
Go ahead. The caller makes a very important note, a very, very important point. And it is the difference between the civil registry and voters registration. A civil registry is concerned with people, simply put. A voters registry is concerned about demographics, where the person lives. So your address must be accurately identified for voting purposes. And that is the trust of a voters registry. It gives precedence to the constituency, the address that you live in. Because that is what gives you the constituency that you live. That is what gives you the authority to vote for your representative. We have 15 constituencies, and each shall return one member. And that member is supposed to be the representative of that constituency. So merging the two has a lot of implications because they concentrate on very different priorities.
Let's go back to the phone lines. Good morning, caller.
Good morning to you, Ms. Blossom, and good morning to the lady. Good morning to the lady and the two gentlemen. I'm not too satisfied that we get in any serious way under this debate there, because I think, first of all, we should have somebody from the parliamentary office to sort of counteract what is being said, whether it is a supervisor election or somebody close to him, because what we're hearing there seems to be different to what is being read, what is being said. They told us that in January, your voter's ID have to be completely renewed, which means that you have to re-register. It was expire, that's what they said. So if it expire, that means it is no longer of use, and you have to put a new one in. But when you go, they're asking you the very same question. So then we need somebody to clarify those things, and the people are there now. Those seem to clarify because they have the same complaint or the same query as us. So I think in a situation like that, we need the supervisor of election to perhaps sit side by side and to counteract what is happening, because I don't think we get in any serious way with it there. And civil society, to me, they help us at times, and at times you don't see them, you don't know where they are. When election are called and people are behaving all this orderly, the same civil society cannot or does not able to put restriction and put things into place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. Panel?
Okay. The caller has two important points. The first relating to the confusion. That is why, as civil society, we think it necessary now to come to the general public to say that, look, we have been engaged in this process and we are confused. We think that there are a number of things that need clarification, and it is something that the public should pay attention to. we have always focused on national interests, national development, and what is in the best interest of the development of Grenada. The democratic process is something that is fundamental to our democracy. The electoral process, is fundamental to our democracy. And the perception by the general public must be one that they have confidence that we have a free and fair elections. So we have always informed the public in this regard. With regard to our activities, it's interesting to note that for the last 2 elections, civil society has produced a code of political conduct that we have asked political parties to sign on to. And that speaks to the behavior that we expect from the political candidates, from the managers, from the supporters, etc., etc. So we have articulated on those issues. The code of political conduct. There was avenues that you could write to civil society, that you could call and complain if you found that potential candidates or their supporters were behaving out of hand. And we have articulated on matters in this regard.
Let me just say here. Yes, the caller, I hope I have gotten him correct. To me, he is confirming some of the things we are saying in terms of the registration. He has been experiencing, and others, that when they go there to replace the card, the information requested of them is quite similar to when they go to register. And he's calling again. I don't think he's putting us in a bad light. He's calling for the Parliamentary Election Office to come forward and to settle the confusion. And I think this is what we're doing here. We're raising the issue, and we are keeping that in mind. So again, from the public, there is an individual saying more or less the same thing, calling for it to be transparent. But I want to go on to the first caller and make 4 points briefly. In connection with what your concern is, Sister Blossom, I take it on behalf of everyone, and Brother Dave responds. In terms of the present supervisor of election has been saying that we need a card to vote. Point. Now, if this is a case, we went through from since January to have, let's say, a re-registration, a replacement, a reissuance. Why it is taking so long to return a new card or to give a new card? Now, let us consider that election can be called anytime at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, whether it is 2 months from now or 2 years. In other words, I'm pointing to the need to have a reform, an amendment to the RPA, the Representation of the People's Act, in which we must give a reasonable time, maybe 2 months or 2 weeks, in which when one applies for a voter's card, he can get it. In the Act, it's not clearly spelled out. However, in January, I think some promise was made that within 2 weeks' time, you will get your card. In this time with COVID, just time, like you all time say, Sister Blossom, we put excuse on COVID. Everything is on COVID. But the same Parliamentary Election Office was proud to say after a month or 2 in isolation, I would say, because of quarantine, whatever, they came out and say, you have a prepared list. So there is no excuse. So let us look at the time for giving you your card, one. Let us look at the resources that the Parliamentary Election Office might be exposed to, and question if they have sufficient funds. What is the financial burden? What is the concern about money in issuing this card? Is there any limitation in the staff arrangement? Having sufficient workers there, including maybe, I don't know, assistants of supervisor of elections, or sufficient funds to go through. So there are many questions which need to be brought forward to the public for us to understand what is the real reason that someone is taking so long to have his or her card renewed, if this is the case, and give clear explanation as the basis of it. There are many, many, many worrying concerns out there. And it's leading, as I said, it's leading, my opinion, fake scenario. It's fake scenario and confusion, possible confusion for the next election coming up. And I will end by saying, and the caller, I think, put the point out. We know as civil society, we are here advocating early enough. And we're calling the general population, including himself and the other persons involved, to understand, come clear with our position to going forward and addressing the parliamentary election office. And when we say the parliamentary election office, we're not only talking about the workers, the supervisor of election, we also must zero in on, respectfully so, Her Majesty, that is the Governor General, because some of the appointments and some of the dealings, she has to sanction. And a report is supposed to be given to Parliament every now and then when it is necessary by supervisor of election, and I can't recall having that done. And so something had to be done in which a thorough investigation, a thorough report need to be placed in the House of Representatives, coming from the Parliamentary Election Office, for us to understand the way forward, especially in light of the recommendations and observations coming from the past general elections. And they need to have reform. And I also want us to note that when this issue of reform came up, I find it concerning. Why is it that the supervisor of election, in a meeting held, the last meeting held with civil society, giving indication that they have to meet again with the OAS to discuss the way forward? Come on. In Dominica, I am told recently, because we knew what took place last year, confusion for electoral reform and the vote of election, it was ugly scenario. But right now, they go through with it, and they get whatever result they had. And right now they have, I think, paying big money to high-class legal persons to study whether or not they need a reform. This thing must not allow to take place here in Grenada. So let us be proactive, let us mind our business and go forward in love.
Mr. Roberts, somebody on WhatsApp is asking that you double-check the information in relation to the court ruling Mr. Brooms, the one you spoke about earlier. They're asking when did this happen? They're saying that there was no reversal of the ruling, so maybe you should double-check that information.
Yes.
And somebody is stating on Facebook that the constitutionality of the Assistant Supervisor of Elections need to be addressed as well. What are any of your thoughts on that statement?
Well, in terms of from the Representation of the People's Act, there's a provision in there which says clearly that the supervisor of elections need to be assisted with at least 2 assistant supervisor of elections. My question is...
But I think the question, Joe, was about the constitutionality of the appointment.
Correct.
All right. Because the Constitution speaks to the construct of the electoral office. Mm-hmm. It gives a supervisor, it gives registration officers, etc., etc., and it sets up the office as an independent office. So I think that is what the caller may be alluding to.
So are you saying that the Constitution has not provided for an assistant supervisor of election? You are saying that?
Well, according to Section 35, that is what I'm understanding from the caller.
Okay.
That's what I understand.
Section 35. Section 35 of the Constitution says that there shall be a supervisor of election whose duty shall be to exercise general supervision over the registration of voters in elections, of the members of the House of Representatives, and over the conduct of such elections. So
that's a good concern.
And that is an independent office that is subject to the control of no person or authority. So
we have to see how the Representation of the People's Act reconcile with the Constitution. I think that's
so
critical.
That's
critical. How is there any consistency or inconsistency? And that's why legal people again as we go forward.
And quickly, Dr. Blossom, before coming out of the engagements in 1988, There was a question as to the verification of the justices of the peace. That question still remains unanswered. And we are actually we're waiting on the supervisor of elections to forward a listing to the civil society grouping. We want to note that the involvement of justices of the peace in the elections process now. And we were asking that a list of the justices of the peace be circulated so that people know who they are.
We need to wrap up the program, but I just wanted to ask this question on the Facebook page. Somebody's asking, we've heard about irregularities in Karakou during the last election. The question is, did civil society visit the Sister Isle at any time to address the issue on voters registration and the irregularities that are going on there?
The information from Karakou forms part of the concerns that we are, in fact, talking about now. The whole matter of the justices of the peace. Justices of the peace were used to verify your Commonwealth citizenship. And they were used to verify basically that you lived, that you satisfied the residency requirement. So those are the concerns that we have. One, whether the justices of the peace have that authority. Is it constitutionally allowed? Bearing in mind that the electoral office has this independence about it. So those are concerns that we are asking for clarification, that we can have discussion around so that people can come away fully informed and more confident that the decisions that are being made on our behalf is in our interest.
I'd like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being our guests this morning. We've quickly run out of time, but I know this is a conversation that would continue as we continue to monitor the developments in relation to this national issue of national importance. Thank you to the panel for being our guests this morning.
Thank you so much, Blossom, for allowing us the opportunity to be with you in the morning. You brighten the morning a little.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Have yourselves a good Monday. Bye, Ms. Ferguson, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Nedd. Enjoy your Monday.
Same to you.
All right.
Okay.
Those were representatives of civil society organization, Mr. Joseph Roberts, Mr. Davidson, Nedd, and Ms. Sandra Ferguson. We thank them all for being our guests this morning. And of course, we would invite them on a future program because this conversation does not end here as it relates to matters of national importance. This involves us all. So we will definitely have this conversation at a future program. And that's the end of my time today. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning, God willing. Janelle is up next with Mid-Morning Buzz. Have yourselves a productive Monday.
It takes a village to raise a child, and our children need our support to help them to become well-rounded and successful adults.
Reading activities from kindergarten to grade 3 build a strong foundation and help the children to learn and grow.
Everyday activities like talking and telling stories to your children help them to read, learn, and grow.
Singing and playing games with your children are great ways to help them learn to read and grow.
When you're out and about, read signs, billboards, and posters with your children.
Let your children choose books that they like and read for at least 10 minutes every day. Or let them read to you.
Connect with your child's teachers and find out what they're learning in school.
We want all of the children of the OECS to read, learn, and grow.
This message is brought to you by the OECS USAID Early Learners Program, funded by United States Agency for International Development. For more information, log on to www.oecs.org/ELP.
one of the world's great rivers, flows from the heart of Africa. It cuts through the largest rainforest outside the Amazon, with wildlife found nowhere else on Earth. It's amazing. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is a vast, beautiful, but tormented place.
Tangu elitaka Bangkoko bakiso balena mpasi le beloko mpimbo mbebeta.
This country is rich, but its people are among the world's poorest. For centuries, its resources have been plundered and it's been ravaged by war.
From here, you cannot find anybody. They start going, all of them. They will disappear here soon.
The violence goes on, and now it's plagued by Ebola. But some change is coming to this country the size of Western Europe. With elections finally on the horizon, we're setting off on a long and challenging expedition to follow the Congo into the heart of Africa. From the Atlantic Ocean to the heart of the continent, the Congo has always been a place of fear and mystery. The mouth of the river is lined with ancient mangrove swamps. It's an eerie and mysterious start to an epic adventure.
This is the point where the Congo River and the Atlantic Ocean meet. Next step is Brazil. It was 1482 when the Portuguese were sailing past this coast and they noticed this surge of brown water and realized there must be a river here. That was the Congo, and this is the direction they took. For 3,000 miles, we're going to take you up this great river to try and understand its history, its riches, its poverty, and its future.
From the Atlantic Ocean, we'll follow the river to its furthest reaches, navigating round its powerful rapids and through its chaotic capital city, Kinshasa, as it arcs up north and then south, twice crossing the equator. We'll visit its war-torn east, venture into Ebola territory, meet rare gorillas, and find out just how rich this country could be. As they sailed up this first stretch of river, the Portuguese must have dreamed of the great riches that lay ahead. They found a well-organized society, the Kingdom of the Congo, open to their offers of trade. But less than 100 kilometers inland, they hit an obstacle that it would take centuries to get around. The rapids. A series of steep cataracts make this stretch of the Congo impassable by boat. And so this port, Boma, became a European center of trade. Guns and goods came in, ivory and slaves went out. These odd monuments in the town reflect that past. It's not a great likeness, but that's Henry Morton Stanley, the first European to travel the Congo from its source to the sea. Stanley was a Welshman who took 999 days to travel here from the eastern coast of Africa. It was an epic journey and opened up the interior of Africa for exploitation.
Le voyage de Stanley avait un but. Le but, comme je vous ai dit, pour le roi Léopold II, c'était à découvrir le Congo parce que quand il avait traversé le pays, il est allé dire aux Anglais, comme je vous ai dit, que j'ai découvert une partie de la terre qui a trop de richesses, mais ce n'est pas colonisé. Si les Anglais avaient accepté, les Anglais, nous, on allait être colonisés par les Anglais. Mais après tout, on lui a demandé d'aller voir le roi Léopold II qui avait des possibilités, et celui-là s'est intéressé du Congo.
The Belgian king was looking for his own colony. The men met, and the Congo Free State was born. Boma was its capital. This was once the Governor-General's residence, but it's not a time in history that's remembered fondly. The powerful rapids that had been the obstacle for so long remain impassable today. But they've also provided great opportunity for hydroelectric power.
There are few places on the planet where rivers run as fast and as hard as the Congo does here as it approaches the sea. A hydroelectric power station built here could provide electricity for the whole of Africa. It would produce twice as much power as any other hydro plant on Earth. That is how rich the Congo could be if the resources were put to good use.
They built 2 small power stations decades ago here at Inga, but there's always been a much more ambitious plan for a grand Inga Dam to be built across this whole valley. A deal has recently been signed to make that happen.
Ce projet va permettre l'essor économique de toute l'Afrique parce que pour le moment, ce que l'Afrique a besoin, une source qui est sûre, une source qui est fiable parce que l'énergie hydroélectrique, c'est une énergie propre et renouvelable. Et nous l'avons sur le site d'Inga en permanence et en quantité.
But promises have been made before, and nothing has happened. The story of the Congo is often the story of lost or squandered opportunity. To get around the rapids means we need another form of transport. The railway was built under the orders of Henry Morton Stanley in the 1890s to replace a long and arduous trek. Around that time, Joseph Conrad walked the route to become a steamboat captain upriver. His diary became The Heart of Darkness, a novel whose title created a stereotype that still haunts the DRC today. The trains only run once a week after being derelict for years. It's an opportunity for the villagers along the way to sell as much as they can in a 5-minute mobile market. Kinshasa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo's crazy, chaotic capital. Joseph Kabila has been president since 2001, but 2 years after delayed elections, he's standing down. Kinshasa is one of Africa's biggest and fastest growing cities. It's big and brash and bossy. There's a strange but colourful subculture that's grown out of Kinshasa and across Africa. The sapeurs, who put their confidence on display.
Comme on a eu Micho la princesse, naza sapeur nazala ana Congo, un défi la canal léopard de la SAP.
Princess is getting ready for a night out. The French acronym SAP, SAPE, stands for the Society of Ambience Makers and Elegant People, and she certainly fits the bill.
Vous comprenez? Naza mamu tema be mambo ilamba pone ilamba do na kotambula nanga na vai nanga bona zana bino normal. Mais so na sina lati déjà Japon et mon asanjaka déjà tidia o senti pena ke donc tam sona lati mapangu na nzoto nanga. But muso ba osumba mituka, ba muso ba osumba mapangu minga na ozo mbonga osumba lupangu na osumba ona ilamba. Na on pesa ngo idéologie funa zana ngo fier. Comprendre?
SAP goes back to the 1920s, but it was the 60s, after independence, when it came into its own. When the musician Papa Wemba championed an extravagant dress code in direct opposition to the country's leader. President Mobutu decreed Western attire a symbol of colonialism, and it was forbidden. Today, thousands of Congolese sapeurs like Princess celebrate the art of dressing well. From here in Kinshasa, the rapids end and boats can travel the river again. And so begins our long arc up to the equator and to Bandaka to explore life on the river at the first major port.